In this essay, we are not just going to look at the conventional view of conservatism, we are going to demonstrate the conventional view is inadequate. Discovering the true nature of conservatism, and the source of its ideas, gives conservatives a more focused approach. The conventional thinker will tell us that conservatism is a political and social philosophy that promotes retaining traditional institutions and practices. We are told that conservatives seek to preserve the status quo and emphasizes stability, continuity, and respect for established customs and traditions. The roots of conservatism, says the conventional thinker, can be traced back to the Enlightenment period, particularly in response to the radical changes brought about by the French Revolution. Conservatism, they say, emerged as a distinct political philosophy in the late 18th century. Edmund Burke, an Irish statesman and philosopher, is often credited as the father of modern conservatism. In his work Reflections on the Revolution in France, 1790, Burke criticized the French Revolution for its radical upheavals and promoted the preservation of established institutions and practices. He argued that society should evolve gradually and respect the accumulated wisdom of previous generations. At the heart of conservatism lies a deep respect for tradition. Conservatives believe that traditions and established practices embody the collective wisdom of generations and serve as a guiding force for present and future actions. They argue that sudden and radical changes can disrupt the social fabric and lead to unintended consequences. Conservatives prioritize social order and stability. They believe that a well-ordered society is essential for individual and collective well-being. This often translates into support for a strong rule of law, respect for authority, and the maintenance of established institutions. Pragmatism is another key tenet of conservatism. Conservatives tend to be skeptical of grand ideological schemes and utopian visions. Instead, they advocate for practical and incremental changes that take into account historical context, cultural traditions, and existing institutions. Private property is considered, by conventional thinkers, to be a cornerstone of conservative thought. Conservatives argue that property rights are essential for individual liberty, economic development, and social stability. They believe that the protection of private property fosters personal responsibility and incentivizes hard work and innovation. Conservatives generally advocate for limited government intervention in both the economy and individual lives. They believe that too much government control can stifle personal freedoms, economic growth, and innovation. However, they also recognize the need for a government that can maintain order, enforce laws, and protect the nation. Conservatism manifests differently in various parts of the world, reflecting local histories, cultures, and traditions. In the United States, conservatism has traditionally emphasized free market capitalism, individual liberty, and a strong national defense. The Republican Party is often associated with conservative principles. In the United Kingdom, conservatism has been shaped by the legacy of the British Empire, a strong emphasis on parliamentary democracy, and a commitment to social hierarchy. The Conservative Party, also known as the Tories, is a major political force in the UK. European conservatism often blends traditional values with a commitment to social welfare systems and environmental conservation. In many European countries, conservative parties support a mix of free market policies and state intervention in areas such as healthcare and education. However, this relativism of conservatism suggests the conventional view has not got to the roots of what conservatism truly is. Conservatism has faced various criticisms over the years. Critics argue that an overemphasis on tradition and stability can stifle progress and perpetuate social inequalities. They contend that conservatism may resist necessary reforms and hinder the adaptation to new social and economic realities. Additionally, the principle of limited government has been challenged by those who believe that a more active government role is necessary to address social injustices, economic disparities, and environmental issues. Critics also argue that the conservative focus on individual responsibility can overlook systemic factors that contribute to social problems. In the modern era, conservatism continues to evolve in response to changing social, economic, and political landscapes. Contemporary conservatives grapple with issues such as globalization, technological advancements, and cultural shifts. Some branches of conservatism have embraced populist and nationalist sentiments, reflecting a reaction against perceived threats to national identity and sovereignty. Environmental conservation has also become an important aspect of modern conservatism, with an increasing number of conservatives advocating for sustainable practices and the protection of natural resources. As a consequence, conservatism is often looked at as an anchor to progressive liberalism. We are the anxiety-prone cousin being dragged into the future by her more adventuresome peer, liberalism. Conservatism, often simply by its reticence to move beyond the past, helps to prove freedom is really the goal of man. The only argument the right and left has, is how fast and how far, do we embrace our liberties? There are several questions we need to ask, and answer. The first is if there is truth or not. If not, nothing we do makes sense. Technically, if there is no truth there ought to be no reality, because reality represents truth. If there is no truth there cannot be a lie, either. We cannot prove there is no truth because to prove this would be to prove a truth. And so this issue cannot even be debated. We have to accept without question, that truth exists. But the second question is the same as the first. We accept truth exists, but is it absolute or relative? As said, this is just another reiteration of the first question. If the truth is relative, it is not true. Truth is absolute or absent. There is no such thing as a relative truth. This question is important because we need to know if there is a right way to live or not. Liberals are of the opinion that every way is right, but they do not accept truth exists, and if it did exist, they do not accept it as an absolute. Truth for a liberal is relative. But truth has to be absolute. We understand this when it comes to math and chemistry. But liberals want the freedom to construct their own reality. To some degree they get away with this because they experience no repercussions. They can change their gender because much of the world goes along with their make-believe. Women can claim they are the equal of men so long as men protect them from the consequence of this assumption. Feminism has been the source of a lot of laws and changed behaviors just to permit women to enter man's spaces without them having to face the full impact of the move. Conservatives tend to see genders as equal, but complementary. Both sexes have their own area of expertise and authority. What we must understand, there is a philosophy under this, that leads to our position on gender differentiation. We are conserving the truth of God. There is nothing higher than this. We defend the word and how it works in the world. Saying men and women have different roles does not exhaust the truth of God, but it is closer to reality than denying the truth. But this opens up a discussion into what conservatism truly is. As a political party, it has always left a lot to be desired. It has gained a reputation for being a party of reaction and tradition, as if we were always against progress. Yet, when we adopt the politics of progress, we acquire much of the persona of a liberal party. Conservatives have struggled to find their own identity. Liberalism is a political philosophy. Politics is about power, and power is about the management of property. Without the control over property and the authority over property, politics has no meaning. But, if this power and authority over property was limited to the property we created, politics could not exist. This is important to understand if we are to understand the difference between liberalism and conservatism. Liberalism is specifically a political philosophy. Without the ability to expropriate property from its rightful owners, liberalism would not be a meaningful idea. Liberals must have access to the property of others to function, which means it needs to legitimize what it does. This is where politics comes in. Politics is not just the means, it is the legitimization of these means. In short, despite appeals to democracy, politics legitimize tyranny. Politics legitimizes the expropriation of property from the rightful owners. This means politics is oppressive even when this oppression is modified or reduced by utilizing the democratic process. Even when we elect a government, the government remains a tyranny that only exists because it has the power to expropriate wealth from the rightful owners. In other words, there are two groups in this world and there can only be two groups. The one group are parasites. These feed off of the labor of others. This group cannot exist without the worker, the group that creates property. These are conservative. If there is no one to produce wealth, liberals would not have anything to allocate and so they could not acquire power. Power is, by definition, the power to redistribute what others produce. However, this is not what conservatives are. We have been led astray by the political establishment. We have taken a king over us in the manner of the Gentiles. Conservatives are naturally aligned with God. But they have been led astray. Conservatives are not naturally political, and we have always found the political arena uncomfortable. This is why our policies always lean towards economics and attempts to implement the free market, rarely understanding politics and the free market are incompatible. By adopting the liberal conception of politics as the preferred method of engagement, conservatives have put themselves at a severe disadvantage. Politically they can neither pledge to eliminate the state nor implement a free market, yet this is their natural advantage. What needs to be understood, is that conservatives are the heirs of the church. Even when not Christian, the natural bent of a serious conservative is towards Christianity. By nature, a conservative will follow the Bible more than a liberal will. Over time, because the idea of the church was corrupted, the term conservative came into use. But conservatism ought to be considered a reformation, a realization by many that the church was not upholding its end of the social contract. Conservatism is man's attempt to bring the church back to reality, back to the point where Christians understand sin is something to be overcome, not tolerated. The church is required to fight principalities and powers, not tolerate them or attempt to adjust to them.